Does your vehicle not stop as quickly as it used to? Does the brake pedal feel spongy or suddenly get hard when braking? Do you hear a squealing or grinding noise when driving or while braking? These are signs that your brakes may need replacing. In this video, we'll discuss the basic steps to removing and replacing brake pads. Since we'll be working under the car, it's important to observe basic safety precautions. Wear a dust mask and eye protection to protect yourself from brake dust. Do not use compressed air to clean brake parts. Always use a spray brake cleaner to keep brake dust from becoming airborne. Park the vehicle on a flat, dry surface and make sure the parking brake is not engaged. Chock the wheels and place automatic transmissions in park and manual transmissions in neutral. Before beginning, gather all the tools and supplies that are needed so that they'll be within reach when you do the job. When jacking the vehicle, ensure the jack is rated for the weight of the vehicle being lifted and use factory lift points which can be found in your owner's manual. Once the vehicle is lifted, support the vehicle on jack stands and not the jack. First, pop the hood and inspect the brake fluid. Brake fluid should be clear with no residue coating inside the master cylinder reservoir, and if it's cloudy or dark, it's recommended that it be replaced. While the vehicle is still on the ground, loosen the lug nuts just a little on the wheel that you'll be working on. Once each lug nut has been loosened, lift the vehicle with a proper jack and support it on jack stands. Once you have the vehicle on jack stands, remove the lug nuts and wheel. With the wheel off, locate the brake caliper and the mounting bolts or pins. The method of attaching a brake caliper to the caliper bracket varies from one vehicle manufacturer to another, but the most popular methods are either a standard mounting bolt, which can be removed with a socket wrench, or a pin type that is squeezed and pulled out of the caliper bracket, or driven out using a punch and hammer. Once you have the caliper disconnected from the caliper bracket, support the caliper so that it doesn't hang from the vehicle and possibly cause damage to the brake hose. You can use a hanger, a rope, a bungee cord, or something similar. Now, remove the old brake pads from the caliper. Sometimes the brake hardware used to hold brake pads securely to the brake caliper is tight enough that a flat-tip screwdriver needs to be used to separate the pads from the caliper. If this needs to be done, take care to prevent damaging the brake caliper or other braking components. Examine the brake pads. Visual inspection is the easiest way to diagnose the condition of the disc brake system, and the brake pads can point you in the right direction of components of the system that aren't working properly. Look for tapered wear, where the lining is worn too thin on one edge of the pad and thick on the other. This is a sign that the caliper pins are worn. Also, look for a step in the lining that indicates that the pads are not installed correctly and aren't making full contact with the rotor. If you notice there is a cracked surface or one pad is worn more than the other, this indicates that the caliper, the guide pins, or other hardware is sticking. Attach a clear plastic tube to the brake caliper bleeder screw and place the other end into an empty container. With the brake pads removed from the caliper, open the bleeder screw and fully compress the caliper piston into the caliper. For front calipers, most of the time you can simply press the piston into the caliper by hand, but occasionally it requires the use of a C-clamp. If a C-clamp is used, place the old pad onto the piston and apply force to the center of the pad. For rear calipers, the piston needs to be screwed back into the caliper. This can be accomplished by using a special brake tool that can be purchased at your local AutoZone. Check your vehicle repair manual for specific instructions. Now, inspect the brake hardware that was installed on the brake pads and brake caliper. Remove the caliper bolts, sliders, and rubber boots and inspect for damage. Check bolts and pins for pitting and rust. Check boots for tears and brittleness. If any of the hardware appears to be worn or damaged, replace with new hardware. Properly lube bolts and sliders with silicone lubricant and apply lube inside any rubber boots or bushings before reinstalling on the caliper. Next, inspect the caliper piston and seal. The piston should be in good condition, free of rust, and the rubber seal should not be broken or cracked. Clean the areas where the brake pad slides in the caliper with a wire brush so that the brake pads can move freely in the caliper. After inspecting the caliper and hardware, take a moment and clean the other components of the braking system before installing new pads. Take off the rotor and clean the mounting surface of the wheel and hub. If you've been feeling pulsation when you press your brake pedal, then your rotors may be warped. Squealing, grinding, vibration, and longer stopping distance are other symptoms of damaged rotors. So, inspect your rotors for grooves in the surface, excessive or uneven wear, heat cracks, warpage, or a surface that's too thin. Defective calipers, overstressed or worn out hardware, improperly positioned pads, or just putting out pad replacement are some of the culprits for bad rotors. Your local AutoZone store can help check the thickness of your rotor. If the rotor has worn down below this thickness, it's time to be replaced. Inspect the hub bearing. Grab it at the top and bottom and wiggle it. There should be no play. Next, spin the hub and feel for roughness. If there is play or roughness, that's a good indicator that it needs replacing. Finally, inspect the entire wheel end area for indications that other items are in need of repair or replacement. Check shocks and struts, as well as rack and pinion or steering units for leaks. Inspect tires for uneven wear that can indicate issues with suspension or steering components. And check tie rods and ball joints for missing boots or excessive play. If the vehicle is a front-wheel drive vehicle, inspect the CV axle boots for rips or tears. Now that the old brake pads have been removed, the mounting surfaces and area have been cleaned, and the wheel end area inspected for damage or wear, it's time to install the new brake pads and reassemble the system. Apply synthetic brake lubricant to the back side of the new brake pads. Make sure to keep lubricants and oils away from the rotors, as well as the friction side of the brake pads. Lubricate and install new brake hardware onto the new brake pads or caliper, dependent upon how the hardware attaches. With everything clean, lubed, and the new pads installed, mount the brake caliper onto the caliper bracket and torque the mounting bolts to the correct specifications. If any hydraulic lines were opened during the brake job, bleeding will need to be done before reinstalling the wheel. Manufacturers vary on timing recommendations for flushing brake fluids, but it's considered best practice to flush a brake system completely every 2 years. Be sure to use new clean fluid when doing so, and for more information on how to bleed the brake system, see our video, How to Bleed the Master Cylinder and Brake System. Once the brake system has been bled, reinstall the wheel. Tighten the wheel nuts by hand until they are as tight as possible, and then snug them down with a ratchet and socket with the wheel still off the ground. Complete this process one nut at a time, going in a star pattern around the tire, one nut across from the other. Jack the vehicle off the jack stand and remove it from under the vehicle. With the jack stand removed, slowly lower the vehicle to the ground without applying the full weight of the vehicle on the tire. Using a torque wrench, tighten the wheel nuts to the required torque specification, once again repeating the star pattern tightening procedure, and when all nuts have been completely tightened, lower the vehicle all the way to the floor. Remove the jack and repeat the process for the rest of the brake system that you're performing the brake job on. Once the brake job has been completed, start the vehicle and press on the brake pedal a few times to prime the system. Once the brake pedal feels firm, remove the wheel chocks and test drive the vehicle to ensure the brakes are working properly. Stop by AutoZone for everything you need to do the job right, including expert advice. Parts are just part of what we do. Get in the zone, and thanks for watching.